Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I'd like to make a few brief comments on behalf of the Australian Greens on this condolence motion. Steve Hutchins came into this chamber not long after I first came here, and he was here throughout all my time previously in this chamber, and others have reflected on the events that led to him finally departing in 2011, I think it was. I just wanted to put on the record, firstly, appreciation on behalf of all of the Greens for former Senator Hutchins' work in this place. As a few people have already said, there is that caricature of hard-nosed machine people from New South Wales, Labor Party in particular. I think there's a general caricature of party apparatchiks, which sometimes has some truth to it, but occasionally unfairly narrows people down to a single description and ignores the wider aspects and the contributions they can make. And understanding the operations of your own party is often quite a helpful thing. But also, on top of that, I think Senator Hutchins' work within this chamber, and particularly in the committees, I think is something that does need recognition. And he demonstrated through that not only his capacity and ability to do the job well, but his ability to recognise and appreciate and get in touch with the human side of an issue and the human impact of policies and legislation. I have served on him on a number of committees, I think, in that sort of community affairs sort of area, and it was clear that he did have that genuine concern for the well-being of people, and he demonstrated that in a lot of the additional comments he made in committee reports, often thoughtful, often just extra reflections beyond just the position of the party on a particular issue or a bill. And it is that aspect of this chamber that is often forgotten because the focus is on the conflicts or the big personalities or the stoushes, or the insults, etc. Often it's the constructive contributions that can make the most long-term impact, even though they get little attention in the short term. And certainly Steve Hutchins, in his time in this place, deserves to be recognised for his contribution to that. I very rarely pass on private side comments that people make to me in the course of my activities around this place, which people might be relieved to know. But I think in this context, this one is probably a reasonable one to make. It does go back to that caricature of the hard man, etc. It was actually in the context, as some of you have been around a while may recall, when former Senator Bob Brown was here and used to often stand up and make points of order about things that he had absolute zero support on, and used to get howled down from all around the chamber, including some of those people in the Democrat seats from those days, most likely. And after a few of those experiences, I remember Steve Hutchins saying to me, you know, I think I'm pretty tough, but that guy's got 7 hides of rhinoceroses on him, which was a comment of admiration, I might say. But I think with that as well, I mean, certainly not suggesting he was in any way a softie, but I think, as people have said, and I'd certainly reflect, his contribution to this place showed that he did have that ability to recognise, and perhaps that soft side, or definitely that soft side, and people noted that in terms of his valedictory speech in this place. And that's an important contribution, to be able to have that, to be able to have that aspect of your character, be able to inform your judgments and your comments on your work in this place as well. So condolences to his family, his friend and his colleagues in particular in the Labor Party and Labor movement that he was so active in for so long, and recognise and respect his contribution to this chamber.
Senator Kitching.
Deputy President. Oh, no, I'm happy to see.
Madam Deputy President, I rise on behalf of the National Party to express our condolences to the family and friends of the late Steve Patrick Hutchins, Hutchie to me, and our mates. He was a Senator for New South Wales and all-round decent bloke. He was born barely a fortnight before I was, in Sydney, the 22nd of April in 1956. Steve was a man who never shied away from some hard work and a battle, if necessary, to look out for a fellow mate. He was a man in tune with the everyday Aussie. Steve Hutchins prided himself on representing his constituents and fighting with all he had to better their individual circumstances. Steve knew all too well the conditions of transport workers, having worked as a forklift driver and a garbage truck driver early on in his career prior to joining the union movement in 1980. His interest in the conditions of transport workers and his graduate skills from the University of New South Wales unsurprisingly saw Steve make his way swiftly through the union ranks. 18 years of hard work in the unions led to a legacy of fighting for what he believed in, the most renowned being that he led a group of 6 New South Wales unions to defy the ACTU policy and pursue a 15% state wage case, instead resulting in the TWU split from the ACTU, the union peak body. That battle was won, and on the 20th of December 1996, that New South Wales Industrial Relations Committee awarded what Steve considered a huge Christmas present for the award system, a 15% wage rise increase to 30,000 transport industry workers. You see, Steve, if you knew him, didn't mind a bit of Christmas cheer, and he was very likely that he celebrated that day with a beer at the local tavern, and where better to hear firsthand the views and experiences of everyday workers. Steve enjoyed sinking a few drinks at the end of the week, as many in this place do, whether it was at the Blue Cattle Dog at St Clair with his old union mates, or settling in at the Holy Grail Bar in Kingston on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, a place that I've spent a fair bit of time myself with Sterlo or Bish, and it was always a very hard place to walk past. Just one more for the road, Nige. Described as a stalwart of the Labor movement. Steve's talent was recognised, and he was chosen by the Parliament of New South Wales to represent the state in the Senate in 1998. And whilst he sat opposite myself in this chamber, I hold Steve and his never give up approach in the highest regard, a man who never backed down from a fight. In his time in this place, Steve prided himself on serving the battler. He did not consider himself a bleeding heart and trumpeted the ethos of a hand up, not a hand out, making him a right-wing advocate of his political party. Now, I can't say I agreed on everything he had to say, and I can recall particularly him referring to my delightful Northern Territory as a tin pot operation when there were moves to self-government, being one of them. But I knew the man for the great bloke that he was. Steve could be hard-headed in the battles as needed, but I knew him as a more jovial in other times, always known for his jokes with colleagues and staff. We've already heard from Senator Juanita about the playing of pranks. Amongst things like giving his staffers, when they joined his office, coupons for the parliamentary cafe. Of course, he just made them up and they were actually appearing. He was just a shocker. So he didn't actually take politics or himself particularly seriously. He lived every day with an absolutely unfeigned determination to represent his constituency. Steve fought a long battle with cancer. All the while he was concerned for others, fighting till the very end, passing too soon, too young. 61-year-old Steve was farewelled by more than 400 this week at St Finbarr's Catholic Church in the Blue Mountains. He received a plaque from St Vincent's de Paul honouring his commitment to the poor and the successes he achieved for everyday battlers. Australia is better for his contributions, and he stands in memory as a courageous, tough and generous man. Much loved as a husband to Victorian Minister Natalie Hutchins, a colleague in the Aboriginal Affairs portfolio who I pass on my most sincere of condolences. Natalie, the work of you and your husband is something that your family can be proud of, and I'm sure he would be so proud of what you have achieved during your time in Parliament. He was a great man, and I'm sure your partnership has been a key factor in both of your successes. I'm sorry for your loss, and I look forward to our next meeting when I can convey my personal condolences to you. Steve was a great father to Lauren, Julia, Michael, Georgia, Madeline, Xavier, as well as grandfather to Jacob, William, Eddie, Nathaniel, Rory and Audrey. I convey the National's sincerest condolences on his passing, forever in our memory and the political narrative of our nation. Let us later perhaps toast to his time in this place and his service, his life of service to others. A mate to many. Cheers, Hutchie. Vale, Stephen Patrick Hutchins.
Thank you, Senator Scullion. Senator Kitching.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I rise to offer a contribution to this condolence motion on Steve Hutchins. I met Steve with the then Natalie Sykes in the early 2000s, when Natalie brought him along, as is often the case for first dates in the ALP, to an ALP function. And it is the test, Senator Billick. But immediately his warmth and his larrikinism and his laconic sense of humour was evident. Also his ability to deflate pomposity. He was the epitome of the lines from Rudyard Kipling's If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. And that was Steve. As Senator Bartlett said, it is often the good and quiet contributions that might make the most lasting impact in politics, and I want to detail one such contribution from Steve Hutchins. As has been noted, he was a New South Wales State Secretary of the Transport Workers Union between 1993 and 1998, and he was always willing to use his great experience and expertise in union affairs to give good advice to those of us working in the union movement. As many senators know, I was involved in the long campaign to rescue the Health Services Union from the corrupt and incompetent regime which over many years destroyed the reputation and effectiveness of that union and damaged the union movement in general. During that campaign, Steve Hutchins was always ready to place his expertise at the service of those of us who were campaigning to clean up that union. I don't think it's too much to say that without his sage advice, the narrow victory that we eventually achieved over the previous regime would not have been achieved. So not only am I in his debt, but so are all of the members of the HSU, including the many low-paid members working in hospitals and other health services, and who have benefited from the effective representation they now have from their reformed union. He managed in his calm and laid-back way to unite many disparate personalities so that a united campaign was able to form. Without him, there would have been a multiplicity of tickets, and with that, the incumbent ticket would have won. The wisdom involved in being able to see a way forward to understand human nature will be very much missed. I am so sad for Nat and for all of Steve's children. He's too soon gone. Thank you.
Senator Polly.
I rise too to make a contribution in relation to Hutcho. That's what he was known as, and when I joined this place in 2005, during my first term I had, some might say, the misfortune at times to be seated next to Hutcho, because it was inevitable that if you had a question, yes, that's what I used to do. If I had a question, you could never put your question down on the desk because it would always disappear. You'd be in the middle of trying to make a very critical political point and your jacket would be pulling you down. So those things, although some may say that would be inappropriate today, but he was a man who was genuine, he was respectful, and I'd have to say when I came to this place I was very fortunate to come at a time when we were in opposition, to learn the way of the Senate, but to be surrounded by people who cared about each other, that was there to support you no matter what. If I was to come to this place now, the sad reality is I don't think we are as collegiate as we were then. And yes, there were the times when we went out for dinner and ended up at the Holy Grail, and I used to remark to my colleagues, I don't know how Hutcho does it. He would turn up the next morning, he'd be ready to give you the advice for the day, and he would perform his duties as a senator. But this was a man who thought about others, not just himself. He was a man who believed in the Labor Party, and he was a man who believed in the union movement, and that never waned. Even though he was relegated on the Senate ticket, he was still the man who was driven to come here and driven to give other people a better life. I think we're all are going to experience the loss. I still find it very hard to believe that he's not going to be on the end of a text message. He's not going to be calling me H, because that's what he used to call me. It was never Helen, it was always H. But he was somebody who I think contributed a great deal to this place and to the country. My heart goes out to his family, all his children, to Natalie, to his grandchildren. It's one thing that you could always say. was a man of the people, he was a man of the worker, but he was such the proudest dad. He loved his children and he was forever talking about them. So on behalf of myself, the reason that I'm still here is probably to some extent Steve Hutchins, who was there to support you through the good times and the bad times, and I'm very grateful for the fact we had a lot more good times than we ever did bad times. Vale, Steve Hutchins.
Yeah.